You can just patiently wait and close deals and develop that skill set and track record over time. But most commonly, you can partner with or affiliate with someone where you can borrow and leverage their credibility and their track records.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you are enjoying the show, getting some great value, I need you to do me a favor and let us hear about it. Leave us that rating and review. It helps us and also helps other listeners find this show so they can get that value to help them on their own real estate investing journey. And if you haven't done so, or this is your first time listening to the podcast, make sure you hit that follow or subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We got a great show today. We're going to talk to my buddy, Mr. Matthew Drane. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Matthew Drane is an experienced commercial real estate executive, broker, and investor with over 13 years of experience. As a dedicated career coach, he specializes in training and mentoring hundreds of sales professionals for national commercial real estate brokerages and has contributed to the growth of several organizations, including 2 Fortune 500 companies. Let's welcome to the show, Matthew Drane.
John, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely, Matt. I went over your bio at a very high level and I had to skip over a couple of things. So why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Sure. You hit on a couple of big things. I was not always in commercial real estate. I started out as a management consultant, and in my mid-20s, I really just desired to explore real estate as a career path full time. So in 2012, I took the leap. I left a 6-figure salary job where I was quite comfortable and went 100% commission, cut my teeth, learned brokerage, built a pretty respectable business. And I've been doing commercial real estate full time since 2012.
What was it about that, I guess, being a broker that intrigued you so much? I mean, you talked about your background and walking away from a 6-figure job to work off commissions. Why'd you decide to make that change?
I ask myself that every single day. It's funny. I wanted to sell apartment buildings because the long term vision was to eventually become an owner and to own assets. And I really was convinced by a few mentors early on, what better way to learn how to properly underwrite, what better way to observe what great operators do, the deals that work out well, the deals that go left, than to be close to the business and to effectively have first look at a lot of opportunities. So that's where I decided I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to learn the business from the ground level. And no better way of doing that than underwriting on average 40 to 60 deals a year for the last 14 years. And that's been a great education. And of course, I've made some great relationships along the way. But that's why I got into the business. I wanted to learn how to own. And then secondly, the dream that's often sold of unlimited earning potential, there's nothing but upside, the sky's the limit, is extremely true. There is no ceiling on your income, but there's really a reality that hits that very few exceed the income that I was earning prior to making that leap. So it definitely is a balance, but the draw of being an entrepreneur, being in control of my own destiny, and not having a cap on my salaried income, that was initially what pushed me over.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that and also being transparent to say like, hey, very few people actually make enough money and exceed to the point where it's worthwhile. Can you maybe give us a little more context there, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
what does, maybe you're for those who are maybe starting out in their career, 3 years or less, looking to get on the broker side, seeing those commission checks and the transactions, you know, what does that really look like? I mean, how much do brokers make just from a broad range? Like what could you expect there?
Absolutely. So I will answer the question as concisely as possible, but there's really three parts to that answer. One, I'll share my personal journey. I started in 2012. I always like to give the date because market cycles and timing definitely have implications to earning potential. But in 2012, ooh, I'm still here. I'm sorry. But in 2012, um, it took me 9 months to earn my first commission. So from going from six figures salaried every 2 weeks, getting a paycheck, to not having a single dollar come in for 9 months. My first deal that I sold was a 6 unit in Hampton Roads, Virginia, in East Ocean View. It was a check that after all splits with the house and my mentor, I took home $2,781 after not earning a check for 9 months. Now, fast forward, I did everything by the book, and I was in the top 10% in terms of new advisors when I launched my career. So that hard work did catch up. In my first 12 months of business, I had 13 exclusive listings. I closed 7 transactions, and I took home $37,000 when it was all said and done. So I started to build into that income. Year two, I earned about $78,000 total. And then by year three, I was into the 200,000 plus range, and I exceeded my previous income. So my personal journey is very much like what I've seen to be the standard. And I've trained and hired and mentored at this point over 300 investment sales professionals. There's naturally going to be those who have a business plan, they execute, and they deliver on the promise that they set for themselves. Those that do that, they're still subject to market conditions, but that clip of maybe earning 50 to 75,000 their first year, if they're putting in the work, doubling that year two if they're consistent, that is pretty common. However, if you look at the average, there's about 2.5 million commercial salespeople or brokers in the industry, and the average earnings is 80 something thousand dollars annually. So there is definitely a wide delta between average top producers. Now, if we talk about potential, yeah, if you look at any brokerage operation, and I've been a market leader for large companies, and I've ran offices in DC, Baltimore, Richmond. If I had 120 producers, which is about what I managed at the time, we did $1 billion in annual sales volume, but I would say 60% of that office's revenue, which was about $20 million on average in gross commissions, 60% came from 10 or so advisors. Top advisor, somewhere around $3 million gross, and the average agent earned on paper about 220,000. But again, averages are misleading. There was a lot of agents on that roster of 120 that did not earn a dollar in a calendar year. So it's hard to really pinpoint exactly where an individual will lie. What is certain is the potential is there. However, the variables that get you there, there's a long laundry list of those.
Yeah, definitely a wide range. When you're on commission, just like any other sales profession, there's going to be a wide range between those who produce and those who are maybe starting out or struggling. You mentioned making that transition, walking away from six-figure salary, and being patient, putting in the work, but being patient with the results. 9 months before you saw that first check, and that check was only for $2,781, right? So
Yeah,
$2,000 check here.
yeah.
But then you finish year one with around 37,000. Year two, you finished at around 80 some thousand. And then year three, you hit that 200K plus number there. If you could go back to 2012, Matt, or more accurately, if you're mentoring or coaching somebody today, what advice would you give your former self so that you can either shorten the time to see more success or see it, either see more success or see success faster?
Compressing time frames really is the primary objective. And what I mean by compressing time frames is what can you do to reduce that wait period? And education, of course, is one. I actually have a process for how do you establish credibility with no track record. because as a new advisor, a new agent in the marketplace, you don't have a long laundry list of deals that you've done to be able to fall back on and refer to. So there's one of two ways of going about it. You can just patiently wait and close deals and develop that skill set and track record over time. But most commonly, you can partner with or affiliate with someone where you can borrow and leverage their credibility and their track record. So affiliating with the right platform, there's several great companies. That's step number one. So letting the brand give you some credibility and give you track record to compress that time frame. Then secondly, finding the right team, the right mentor, the right group of peers to partner with to then further accelerate, that earning window. So those are the two primary things. And then last but not least, just having the proper training. So education is one thing. You can go get certifications and designations and join all the organizations that you want, but it still comes down to learning the art of brokerage, learning the practice behind the actual trade and craft, and that's where a lot of, I believe, people who get into the business, they miss the opportunity because they try to find fees, but fail to build a business that's sustainable over time. And that's what really separates the ones who are still in the business, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and those who got into a hot market with the right buyer, with the right interest rate environment, and made a lot of money, but still don't have a real sustainable business.
Talk to me more about that real quick. So you talked about people who are looking to find fees and maybe make money immediately, but they're not building a sustainable business. What's the biggest mistake you see in people doing that?
The biggest mistake I see, quite honestly, is one, prioritizing your self interest. So if you're in the business to, and don't get me wrong, I'm a capitalist. Making money is great, but the fundamental role of an agent, especially if you are a investment sales professional who is a seller representative with a business plan of listing property, right? So you're a listing agent. Your primary fiduciary is to represent your client's best interest. So priority number one is not how do I go find a fee? Priority number one is how do I serve that client, serve their needs, and be the best service provider and fiduciary for what their business plan requires. And to do that, you often have to have processes, a plan. You have to have an approach to the business, not just what some folks have been very successful doing, chasing deals, finding fees, which you can make a lot of money, but that's not quite sustainable. So I would say the foundation for anyone that's been in the business for quite some time is, where did they start to build their foundation, and what is their business plan? That business plan often has a few characteristics: specialization on a certain product type, so not being a jack of all trades, specialization on a certain submarket of focus. It's very difficult to know what the buyer yield expectation is for 1960s vintage brick 2-bedroom townhome style construction in a particular submarket, what the buyer yield expectation is on an insurance and tax adjusted T3, right, for that product, and also know all the ins and outs of office leasing for Class A office space downtown CBD. Two very different worlds, and many people get into the business of commercial real estate and they try to chase fees, which naturally makes them a jack of all trades. And I strongly believe that you can do a lot more by focusing on less. So I don't know if I answered that question, but it's a pretty complex answer to how do you actually survive, how do you sustain, and how do you compress timeframes?
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say, if I'm playing it back, is that you want to build a business where you have an expertise in a certain area as opposed to just chasing listings, right?
Correct.
So yes, you might be able to list, a strip mall on the east side of town, or a multifamily property on the north side of town, or an office building on the west side of town, but you're not really developing an expertise where people know that you're the go-to. Like, you really have the knowledge and expertise, and this is why they should hire you to sell their property in that location. And I think the best brokers I know exactly what they do. I know where
Right.
they thrive. I know the size assets. I know the asset class. So it's B class properties, C class, A class properties, trophy assets. Like
Right.
the really good brokerage firms usually build that brand and reputation where you know when to call them. You know that they're the leaders in that space, or at a minimum, you know that they're well experienced in that type of asset. So I think there's a lot of value when you think about what you want to build by going back to building a brand where people know, okay, you know what, this person actually has done this. They've got a track record. They've sold 3 or 4 of these properties last year. Now that's going to make it easier to sell a similar type of asset. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it's tough because a lot of times starting out, especially
You're
when you
trying to
don't
find
have
that
the
check.
income, you need the
Yeah.
check. You
You
need
need
the
the
money.
check. So you're doing deals that don't make sense. Right. I mean, but here's the other thing too. I started with the benefit to the client. So the client benefits because they know exactly that they've hired the right advisor, because they know that you understand the nuances to how I should underwrite this asset given buyer and market expectation, reality, because you've seen 50 other deals that are quite similar. So you have expertise in the product type and in the submarket. But it's also a benefit to the broker because, once I do a BOV, or a broker opinion of value, on a particular asset of a certain vintage, I can then pretty much get a feel for like kind assets. I've now already kind of developed the comp set from a rental standpoint. I know where the income and the revenue should be projected. I've looked at 12 like kind deals, so I understand vacancy factor for that type of product. I understand concessions. I know exactly where the sales comps are trending for like kind and comparable products. So I'm actually compressing time frames myself by not having to go relearn a whole nother product, a whole nother submarket every time I get a lead. So it's also self-serving to focus on one thing and do one thing very well, because you develop systems and you then have efficiency in how you're prospecting and also how you're serving your clients.
I
And
love
guess
that because
what? You create a buyer pool for a 50 unit asset of a certain unit mix in a certain zip code. That buyer pool is probably the same buyer pool or a very similar buyer pool for the next asset that you take to market, representing another client. So you're building this snowball slowly that at some point, the 9 months of no income and the 18 months of no check, it becomes more of a natural sustaining business because you've built it to last.
I love that. And that's great insight on any business, right? Now, we're obviously talking about commercial real estate and the broker side, but I think any business, right? If you know who you want to serve, how you serve them, you got to be the expert, right? You got to get the knowledge. You have to be the trusted advisor. That's going to make you a powerful person and a reliable source, right? That helps so much if you're looking to build a sustainable model. We've been talking about things from your lens as a broker. I want to flip it and talk about it a little bit more for our listeners, right? Many of our listeners are more on the investor side of it, looking to get deals. So you said some things that I think, at first, if you weren't really paying attention, they may have just assumed you were talking about an investor, right? No
Right.
credibility, building a track record. I got to align myself with someone else. For that person who is new, starting out, have never done a deal, I know a lot of times there's this fear factor where they don't want to reach out to brokers. They don't want to be, I'm just say differently. They don't want to reach out to brokers. They want to be seen as credible buyers, but they are not quite certain what they're doing. Maybe they say the wrong thing, or they're finding ways to lower their credibility. What tips would you give that new investor so that they can appear credible when they do reach out to a broker?
That's a great question. And I actually just did a presentation on this very topic. And the presentation was, 5 steps to building instant credibility. It was from the lens of a advisor or an investment sales professional. But to your point, same 5 steps for an aspiring, a current, or even an established principal, acquisitions associate, or owner. So quickly, I'll give you the 5 things. You can drill down on any one of these 5 that you want, but number one is having an understanding of the market. So market research and just understanding what your business plan is. Business plan for acquisitions might very well be termed your buy box. there's nothing worse than um, taking a meeting with a new prospective purchaser in the marketplace, and you ask them questions about, tell me about the last deal that you acquired. Tell me what type of deal, makes sense for you. Tell me about your criteria. And they say something as broad as anything from 10 to 500 units, right? Well, what markets, sub markets are you specifically looking at? We're looking at Columbus, Ohio. That's pretty broad. I mean, it's pretty broad. So number one is having an understanding of the market and also having a clear business plan for yourself. Are you a value add acquisition type of acquisition target? Or are you looking for core plus? Are you looking for stabilized assets where you are literally parking money, not seeking cash flow? What is your investment thesis, and clearly defining that? So that's number one. Number two is, again, identifying your market specialization. So if you're a broker, you have to know what product type you're selling and where you want to be. Same thing as an investor. So drilling down on what is your actual area of focus. Number three, you have to do the homework. If you understand historically where the market has been, so you've gone back 5 years, you understand the last 5 years of sales activity and trades, you understand supply and demand dynamics within that market, you have some idea of what's happened from a demographic shift over the last period of time. You have to have some basic knowledge to be viewed as credible. Number four, where is the current market? So do you really know where deals are trading? Or are you still making offers, based on data from 2 or 3 years ago? Are you still underwriting to an old underwriting standard, or have you caught up to today's market expectations? So having a clear idea of what's happening now, but also knowing where the market has been. Then number five is drilling down on your market specific underwriting standards and assumptions. I still see some brokers, quite frankly, who are underwriting repair and maintenance in a pro forma, at numbers that I was using in 2012. I still see, insurance per unit per year, property and liability. And that's one nuance too. When I started in the business, I started in a coastal market. So I knew that for insurance, it wasn't just a property and liability premium that I'm underwriting. I'm underwriting wind, flood, hazard. So being able to actually, with confidence and within a certain range of predictability, know where you should be underwriting based on real numbers and data, not what you learned 10 years ago when you took some class, and not using what your mentor in, Oklahoma is underwriting for their assumptions. If you're in a market like DC, that might differ very much. So I said a lot there, but those are 5 distinct things that both brokers and principals have in common. You have to have those boxes checked to really be credible from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm gonna play that back right. You said 1, understanding the market; 2, being market specialization, so knowing what you're looking for; 3 is really market understanding, so we can talk about historicals or doing your homework for the market; 4, understanding the current market; and then 5, understanding the kind of specific nuances of that market. So again, in the Midwest, there are certain things that are going to be different than the East Coast, which is different than the Southeast. I tell everybody, if you're in Florida, if you're in the Gulf Coast investing in
Right.
those markets, like, don't use any insurance number from any rule of thumb. You got to get a
Right.
real quote. Just get a real quote. That's the only number you can use. So just make sure you understand those things. It's really, really key. For that newer investor, right? You talked about understanding the market, understanding what they're looking to buy. Having kind of that back end knowledge. That newer investor may not have as much access to knowledge on where the market was previously. I know you've talked about, when you're talking to investors, you're going to ask them about their previous deals, and if they say, "Well, this is going to be my first deal,"
That's okay.
again, what can they do there to help make sure that, again, they're not eroding credibility, since they don't have that market knowledge as far as what's happened in the past, but also this is their first deal.
It's the same answer for that new investor as well as a broker in a new market. John, we've known each other for quite some time. We met when I was living in Washington, D.C. I moved to Columbus, Ohio 4 years ago. I would get the same question. Tell me about what you've sold in Ohio. And the same answer that I would suggest that investor give is be honest, be truthful, and don't try to misrepresent, the facts. Now, I answered that question as a broker with, we just stood up a new shop. We're the new kids in town. However, the firm has historically done X amount of volume annually for this type of asset. Me personally, in my career, I've sold $600 million in multifamily assets just like this. So while I haven't transacted in this market, right, I can still lean on my past track record credibility, and it does transfer. It's transferable. So the same answer to that investor is, if you haven't done a deal, that's okay. Share your experience. I came from management consulting. I learned a lot of things in management consulting that have application to the real estate business. So you can still demonstrate credibility as a professional. Being truthful gets you some credit and at least helps the conversation, because brokers are really good at dishing out BS, but we're also really good at filtering the BS too, right? So we're going to sense if you're trying to misrepresent or be dishonest. So just be truthful up front. And then back to, how do you borrow track record? Bring somebody alongside with you. Bring a mentor. Leverage their track record. Leverage their portfolio. And it's okay. Just be honest up front about it, because brokers are incentivized to do deals. If there's a path to get you to the closing table, I'm not as concerned if you've never done a deal in that market or if you've never bought an apartment building. I'm more concerned with, can we work together? Can we overcome obstacles? Can we navigate a transaction and then land somewhere where all parties on the other side are happy with the result? So track record is important, but is more so, how can you leverage your unique skills as an individual, as a professional? And if you can't do it, pro tip, go assemble the team that you can then point to and lean on. So there's ways around track record. There is not a way around being dishonest and not having integrity and trying to misrepresent, your track record.
I love that, man. That's some great feedback, right? So one, be honest with your experience, be honest with the questions, answer them honestly. But I wrote down the word pivot.
Yeah,
If you've never done a deal, don't just say, "Oh, this is my first deal," and stop, right? You
yeah,
need to pivot to some form of credibility with your experience, being a professional, whatever that is. It could
yeah,
be, "Hey, this is gonna be my first deal. However, I'm partnering with this guy. He's done 22 acquisitions in this
right,
market, right? Or here's my mentor. I'm working with my mentor. He's done X, Y, Z. Or I'm working with this group. Or again, hey, this is my first deal here, but I come from a background professional. I'm a, doctor and whatever it is, right? I think
exactly.
most brokers are just trying to get a sense that you have the capability of closing on this deal. Either you doing it in the past is the quickest form of establishing that, but it's not the only way to establish that, right? They want to make sure
Yeah,
you have the means, the resources, the money, the ability to close on this deal. That's what all these questions are about. So I love that. And then to your point, if you don't have it, pivot to the resources that you have that can get the deal done. You just said something there at the end that I love. You said, "Hey, we can overcome some of these challenges. We cannot overcome the dishonesty." And when it comes down to it, I always tell my clients that brokers only get paid when a deal closes.
right.
So that notion of overcoming obstacles is really key, because once you lock in, you get that, purchase sale agreement signed, everyone wants to see this deal happen. So
Right.
from time to time, we know that deals do fall apart. I know that's very disheartening for everyone involved. As the broker, what are some of the tips that you would give to investors to ensure deals do not fall apart, either from pre-work up front before they get under contract, or being more flexible during that due diligence time frame?
That's a great question. So doing your research up front is always a key ingredient to success. So understanding the market prior to making an offer, prior to going to contract, certainly doing beyond surface desktop due diligence. As a starter, have you actually visited the asset prior to going to contract? I know in my training and how I was raised in the business, we don't go to contract unless the purchasing entity, the sponsor, has actually visited the property, seen the real estate. Do we have proof of funds? Do we have some form of schedule of real estate owned? So do we know who's backing the loan? If it's not them personally, who is the sponsor? Is their balance sheet strong enough? So we do a lot of things up front from a probability brokerage standpoint to ensure that if we do move forward, at least we got a lot of the big things out of the way that could blow the deal up, right? There's always going to be things in due diligence that we didn't uncover prior to going to contract. So as a buyer, just like anything, if you come across an issue, be it a physical concern with the condition of the property, getting multiple bids, so getting multiple quotes from vendors to remedy any issue and every issue that might come up in that due diligence process. If it's a financial issue, meaning collections were not as presented or represented by the owner, maybe it is something that is just a little off with the finances, being able to negotiate escrows and things that most owners, we tell them up front, we can overcome challenges, but we can't overcome surprises. So if you have a surprise for us, let us know now because we can get ahead of it. So if you're just holding information back and it comes out in due diligence, if a retrade occurs because you knew that you aren't collecting the rent as represented in your financials, if you knew that, that retrade is warranted, right? That is not something that we can, as a broker, just magically fix. Like, so be upfront on both sides. I tell the seller that. The buyer also has to be upfront. If your lender pulls back proceeds, if your lender, reduces the term or reduces the amortization schedule, your deal resizes and repencils, let's talk through it. We might be able to find ways to remedy it. But open communication is key to any negotiation. And most real estate deals is not one single negotiation up front. I agree to this price. Let's move forward. Let's do it. Every real estate deal that I've done, and it's been over 100, in varying degrees of full cycle, right? Every single one has been a very prolonged negotiation with multiple intervals that ultimately, we land at a destination, but it's an ongoing share of information and then solving that problem collectively. And everyone plays a part. The buyer plays a part by being transparent with the broker and communicating. The worst thing that a buyer can do is go dark. And that's when you have good news or bad news. If you go dark, we just assume that it's bad news, right? I've never not heard from someone for like 2 or 3 weeks and came back and like closed the deal and everything is fine. So constant communication from all parties is a big part of navigating through those challenges.
I love it, man. Great advice, great tips there, just to understand what it takes to get over the various obstacles that will pop up so you can do more deals. You're also focused on building this community of new brokers and agents through Revolt CRE. I want to make sure folks know how they can learn more. You can go to revoltcre.com. You can also connect with Matt on his LinkedIn, Matt Drane. So we'll make sure we link to both of those in our show notes. Right now, we're going to transition to our round of insights. Are you ready?
All right. Ready.
Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
A failure or apparent failure. I mean, I failed at multiple businesses throughout my career. Started out in high school, entrepreneurial. I would say every venture that I poured energy into that did not work out was part of my success story today. Intestinal fortitude was developing a different perspective and lens of viewing challenges and situations. So I would say every single failed venture and business I've started that was viewed as a failure has led to what's now my collective and overall success.
Give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
For my business, I would say Landglide. And Landglide is a tool that I use on the go to view land parcels and then quickly be able to link to the county county site and glean more information from there. So Landglide is always on my phone.
What's the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year?
10x is better than 2x. I mean, it's it's a no-brainer, and it's one of those things that the more and more you dig into it and actually apply the principles, you start to see the light. So that's the one for me.
Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
I would say my morning routine, and that morning routine consists of everything from listening to the same podcast every morning for some initial motivation, spending time quietly in meditation and prayer, and definitely sweating. I mean, sweating before 6 a.m. is has been a key ingredient to my routine.
Love it, man. All right, give me your number one insight to stand out with brokers.
To stand out with brokers, I would say being communicating. Because look, there's a lot of prospective buyers who are always looking for deals. You send them deals and they go dark. So if there's one thing you can do to stand out, is every time a broker sends you a deal, even if it's a 2 or 3 bullet point reply and response, reply. You don't have to go through a full underwrite. You don't have to submit an offer on every single deal, but at least acknowledge the deal that you've been begging for and asking for when that broker delivers it.
It's great feedback there. All right, Matt, you are in Columbus now. Give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
My favorite place in Columbus, there's a lot of great places. I would say the Barn. The Barn is a steakhouse, higher end restaurant in Gahanna, which is a neighboring suburb to Columbus proper. But the Barn is a place that never fails me.
All right, the Barn, man. Next time I'm up there, I got to check that one out. Matt, you gave us some great information. Loved hearing your story going from, 6-figure career, walking away from it all to start your career as a broker, making nothing for 9 months, getting your first commission check of just $2,700, but ultimately being able to stick with it, learn, grow, scale to build a really big firm. From there, leading so many different groups, so many companies, training so many other real estate agents, commercial brokers, and giving us the tips and insights of what it takes to earn credibility, to stand out, to really grow and thrive in this industry. I know that you are passionate about helping other people who are maybe where you were starting out, creating that platform through Revolt CRE. Again, if you want to learn more, go to revoltcre.com. And again, we'll link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. So we'll link to both of those things in the show notes. Matt,
Awesome.
thanks again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.